The Excelsior Dominion was a name whispered in fear across the galaxy. Their warships, black as the void itself, cut through space with a chilling silence. Wherever they went, death followed. Entire star systems fell under their might, entire planets swallowed by the unrelenting force of their invasion. No one could challenge them. No one could stop them. The Excelsior were the apex predators of the galaxy, and for centuries, they knew nothing but conquest. Horizon 4, a small colony world in the Outer Rim, was the latest addition to the growing list of planets to fall under Excelsior rule. Its people had long been peaceful, focused on farming and trade. They never expected the cold, calculating warlords of the Excelsior to notice their world. But the Dominion had no need for reason. It was a land ripe for the taking. And so, the Excelsior came without warning. The invasion began with a single powerful strike. The Excelsior warships descended from the sky, their massive forms blotting out the stars. For the people of Horizon 4, the sight was like a nightmare come to life. Panic swept through the cities as the invasion began. The Excelsior offered no mercy, no peace. Their soldiers, tall and armored in their terrifying black exosuits, marched through the streets, destroying everything in their path. Submit or be eradicated, their leader, Commander Zekdar, declared over the loudspeakers, his voice cold and distant. For many on Horizon 4, surrender was the only choice. There was no fight to be won. The Excelsior had never known defeat. Resistance was pointless. And so, the people bowed their heads in submission, hoping for a life of servitude, rather than death. Yet, even as the Excelsior ravaged the land, there was one group of people who refused to give in. A group of children, hiding deep within the ruined remnants of Horizon 4's central city, were the last to be captured. They had seen the horrors unfold before their eyes, seen their homes burned, their parents taken, their lives destroyed. But despite the overwhelming force of the Excelsior, they held on to one thing: hope. They believed that there was still something, somewhere, that could save them. Among them was a young girl named Lyra. She was no older than 10, with wide, curious eyes and a heart filled with courage. She had lost everything in the invasion: her home, her family, her world. But she had not lost her spirit. As the Excelsior continued their rampage, Lyra and her friends huddled together, silent and trembling, as they hid from the invaders. One day, their hiding place was discovered. A group of Excelsior soldiers found the children, hiding in the remains of a collapsed building. There were no weapons among them, no way to fight back. They were simply children, scared and helpless. Commander Zekdar arrived on the scene, his cold gaze sweeping over the frightened faces of the children. He didn't see them as innocent lives caught in the middle of a war. To him, they were nothing more than a nuisance, a sign of resistance that needed to be crushed. Without hesitation, Zekdar turned to one of his soldiers. "Eliminate them," he ordered in his usual detached tone. The soldier nodded, stepping forward with his blaster raised. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what was about to happen, but she could feel the weight of the moment, the end of something precious. A loud blast echoed through the air as the soldier fired. Lyra's eyes went wide as one of the children, a boy no older than 8, collapsed to the ground, his life taken in an instant. A scream echoed from the others. But the soldier didn't flinch. Zekdar simply watched, his face expressionless. "Let this be a lesson," he said, his voice cold as ice. "Resist us, and this is what happens." The Excelsior soldiers turned and began to leave, moving on to their next task, destroying the remnants of Horizon 4. But for Lyra and the others, this moment would be burned into their memories forever. The life of that child, innocent and pure, had been taken in cold blood by the very beings who had invaded their world. It was the first time that Excelsior had ever killed a human child, and they thought nothing of it. To them, it was just another day of conquest, another victory. But what they didn't know was that their actions would set in motion something far greater than they could ever have imagined. As the Talzur left the ruins behind, no one noticed the small, blinking light hidden in the wreckage. A distress signal, sent from the heart of Horizon 4, began to travel across the stars. It was a cry for help, and it was about to be answered. The Talzur had left Horizon 4 in ruins, their warships ascending into the sky, leaving behind nothing but ashes. The people of the planet, broken and beaten, were scattered, taken as prisoners to be enslaved or left to perish in the wreckage of their homes. The child's life lost to their cruelty had seemed like just another forgotten moment in their quest for domination. But they were wrong. The galaxy would soon know their mistake. Across the stars, in the far reaches of the Human Federation, a single signal pierced the void. It was a quiet, desperate pulse, an emergency distress call, sent from Horizon 4's ruined heart. It traveled through space like a whisper, unnoticed at first, but it found its way to the one place where it would matter most. The UNSC Revenant, a lone human warship, was drifting in deep space on a routine patrol when the distress signal reached its sensors. The Revenant was part of a special human unit, a small, elite crew trained for the impossible. Its captain, a seasoned and battle-hardened officer named Captain Maria Hawk, had seen horrors in the galaxy that most humans would never understand. She had fought against alien invaders, hostile space pirates, and rogue factions, but nothing like the Talzur. Maria stood at the helm of the Revenant, her eyes narrowing as the distress signal came through the comms. She could hear the quiet desperation in the voice of the message, though it was barely more than a whisper. She didn't need to hear the details. The moment the word Horizon 4 was spoken, she knew what had happened. Horizon 4, she muttered under her breath. Those bastards. She immediately turned to her crew. Prepare the ship for FTL. We're heading to Horizon 4. Get me everything we've got on the Talzur Dominion. I want to know everything. The crew scrambled to obey, and in moments, the Revenant's engines roared to life, jumping into faster-than-light travel. Captain Hawk was a woman of few words, but her gaze was always sharp and her determination unshakable. Horizon 4's message had hit her like a thunderbolt. Her duty, her mission, was clear now. The Talzur had taken something from humanity, and they would pay for it. Meanwhile, on the surface of Horizon 4, the people, though broken and scattered, began to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. They had lost everything. Their homes, their families, their very future seemed bleak and uncertain. But in the midst of despair, something unexpected began to stir. In the ruins of the city, a few survivors, those who had managed to escape the initial assault, had begun to rally. Among them were human soldiers, those who had fought back against the Talzur in vain, but their fight had not been in vain. There were still weapons, still tools of resistance hidden beneath the rubble. And though their numbers were small, their will to fight had not been extinguished. They were fueled by a single thought: revenge. Lyra, the young girl who had witnessed the cold, brutal death of her friend, stood among the survivors. Her heart ached for the loss of the child, but she refused to let it break her. The Talzur had shown no mercy, but she would show them none in return. She couldn't save her world, but perhaps, just perhaps, she could do something far more important: bring the fight to them. The survivors, including Lyra, gathered in secret locations across the wrecked city. They knew it was dangerous, but the will to fight was stronger than the fear that gripped them. They would send a message to the Talzur that humanity would never bow to them, no matter how far their empire stretched across the stars. And as if on cue, the Revenant arrived. Captain Hawk and her crew had prepared for the worst. They had studied the Talzur Dominion for years, understanding their tactics, their strengths, and most importantly, their weaknesses. The Talzur were relentless, but they were also arrogant. They believed their power to be absolute, their control over the galaxy unchallenged. But Captain Hawk had a different perspective. The Xalzir had never faced humanity in full force. The Revenant dropped out of FTL space above Horizon 4, its dark form casting a shadow over the ruined planet below. The ship's weapons were fully charged, its hull reinforced, its crew ready. The Xalzir warships had already left, but their presence still lingered. And as Captain Hawk watched the planet below, she knew one thing for certain. The Xalzir had made a mistake. "Bring us into orbit," she ordered, her voice calm but filled with authority. "Activate the long-range scanners. I want to know the Xalzir's last known location." The sensors beeped as they scanned the planet's surface. A small resistance group was still active in the ruins. They were the ones who had sent the distress signal. They were the ones who would make the difference. "We've got them," the sensor officer reported. "They're hidden in the ruins of the central city. It's a small group, but they're armed." Captain Hawk's lips curled into a determined smile. "Good. Prepare a shuttle. We're going in." The UNSC Revenant hovered in orbit above the shattered remains of Horizon 4. The planet, once a thriving colony, now lay in ruins, a victim of the Xalzir's unstoppable march across the stars. As Captain Maria Hawk stared out from the bridge of the Revenant, she felt a cold resolve settle in her chest. The Xalzir had underestimated humanity, something they would soon regret. "Bring the shuttle online," Captain Hawk ordered. "I'm going down with a team. Get the rest of the crew ready to deploy." Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Nathan Cole, gave a quick nod. "Understood, Captain." The shuttle's engines hummed to life as it detached from the Revenant, its sleek form cutting through the darkness of space and making its way down to the surface. Hawk sat in the command seat, her eyes focused, the cool display in front of her showing the damaged planet below. The shuttle shook slightly as it entered the atmosphere, but Hawk remained steady. She had been in more dangerous situations than this, and none of them had ended in defeat. Within moments, the shuttle touched down, its thrusters kicking up a cloud of dust as it landed in the heart of Horizon 4's ruined central city. The city was a ghost of its former self, once a place of bustling markets, peaceful homes, and lively streets. Now it was nothing more than a broken shell. Rubble littered the streets, the skeletal remains of buildings rising like silent monuments to the destruction. The shuttle door opened, and Hawk's boots hit the cracked ground. She stood tall, her expression unreadable as she surveyed the scene. The air was thick with smoke, the remnants of Xalzir fire still smoldering in places. There was no sign of life, no movement, except for the quiet murmur of the wind through the ruined streets. "We've got survivors," Lieutenant Cole said as he checked the scanner. "They're holed up in the old government building, just ahead." Hawk nodded. She wasn't here to waste time. "Let's move. Stay alert." The team moved quickly through the ruins, their boots crunching against the broken concrete and metal. As they approached the government building, the air grew tense. Hawk could feel the pulse of anticipation in her chest. These were humans, survivors, people who had witnessed unimaginable horror and yet had not broken. They were the proof that even in the darkest of times, humanity would find a way to fight back. Inside the building, they found the survivors, about 20 of them, all huddled together in a large room. They looked up as the team entered, eyes wide with both hope and fear. Among them was a familiar face, Lyra, the young girl who had been one of the first to witness the Xalzir's brutal attack. Lyra's eyes locked with Captain Hawk's, and for a moment, everything else faded away. The young girl was no longer the scared child hiding in the ruins. She had become a symbol of everything that Xalzir had underestimated. She stood tall, her fists clenched, ready to fight. "Are you the ones who sent the signal?" Hawk asked, her voice soft but firm. Lyra nodded. "We did. We need your help," she said, her voice steady, though it carried the weight of everything she had been through. Hawk kneeled to meet her at eye level. "We're here. You're not alone anymore." The survivors crowded around, eager for answers. Some were injured, others were exhausted, but all of them shared the same determination in their eyes. They had fought to stay alive, and now they had a chance to fight back. The Talzur had taken so much from them, but they were ready to make them pay. "We've got a plan," Hawk continued, standing up and addressing the group. "We've studied the Talzur. Their soldiers are brutal, but they're also arrogant. They think they're invincible. And that's where we're going to hit them. We're going to make them regret ever setting foot on this planet." The survivors listened closely as Hawk outlined her plan. It was risky, but it was the only way to strike a blow against the Talzur while they were still scattered and unprepared. The Revenant's firepower would be the hammer, and the survivors, with their knowledge of the terrain and the Talzur's weaknesses, would be the anvil. Lyra's eyes sparkled with hope as Hawk spoke. She had seen the Talzur's brutality firsthand, but now she was beginning to believe that they could be stopped. They could make a stand. They could win. "We'll move out at dusk," Hawk said, glancing at the sky through the broken windows. "Get some rest. We'll need everyone sharp for what's coming." The survivors nodded, many of them quietly speaking to each other as they began to prepare. Lyra lingered near the back of the group, her gaze drifting to the shattered city outside. She thought of the child who had been killed, the innocence lost. It had all started with one life, one child, but in that loss, something had been born, a fire. And that fire would spread, reaching across the stars. The night fell over Horizon 4 like a heavy blanket. The air was thick with smoke, and the ruins of the city stood silent under the stars. The survivors, now armed with the few weapons they had scavenged, moved through the darkness with purpose. Captain Maria Hawk stood at the front of the group, her eyes scanning the horizon as they made their way toward the Talzur's last known position. The plan was simple. They would strike quickly and decisively, using the element of surprise. The Talzur soldiers were scattered across the planet, some still searching for survivors, others celebrating what they thought was their victory. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity's ability to fight back. Hawk knew that this first strike was critical. It had to send a message, not just to the Talzur, but to every species in the galaxy who might dare to challenge humanity. They were no longer weak prey. They were no longer just victims. Humanity had learned how to fight. They had learned how to survive. And now, they were going to make the Talzur pay for every life they had taken. As they reached the outskirts of the Talzur base, Hawk signaled for the group to stop. She motioned for the survivors to take cover, and they quickly scattered into the shadows. Hawk crouched down beside Lieutenant Cole, her eyes focused on the compound in the distance. "It's time," she said, her voice low but filled with determination. Cole nodded, pulling a small device from his belt. He pressed a button, and the night was suddenly filled with the sound of distant explosions. The Talzur soldiers, who had been resting or patrolling the area, scrambled to their feet in confusion. The surprise attack had begun. Within moments, the Talzur were in disarray. The survivors, using their knowledge of the city's layout, struck with precision, targeting the Talzur's vulnerable points. Hawk's team moved with deadly efficiency, taking out one soldier after another, with quick, clean strikes. They were not here for a prolonged battle. They were here to teach the Talzur a lesson they would never forget. The Talzur soldiers were caught off guard, their usual arrogance replaced with panic as they realized they were under attack. But their panic quickly turned to terror as they saw the humans moving through the shadows, striking from all sides. It was as if they were being hunted by ghosts. One by one, the Talzur soldiers fell. The survivors fought with a desperation born of loss, but also with a fierce will to protect what was left of their world. Lyra, despite her youth, fought alongside them, her small but steady hands gripping a rifle. She had seen too much to be afraid anymore. She fought not just for herself, but for the memory of the child whose life had been taken, and for the chance to take back her home. Hawk led the charge, her soldiers moving like a well-oiled machine. Her mind was sharp, calculating every move, every step. She knew that Xal'Zur would retaliate, but for now, they were caught in a trap. They had no idea what was coming, and that made all the difference. The battle was swift, over in mere minutes. That Xal'Zur, once thought to be the unstoppable force of the galaxy, were left scattered and broken. Hawk stood among the fallen, her chest heaving, as she surveyed the aftermath. It had been a clean strike, too clean for the Xal'Zur to understand. They had no idea what kind of storm was coming. Is everyone accounted for? Hawk asked, her voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. Cole nodded. All survivors are safe. We lost no one. Hawk looked to Lyra, who was standing off to the side, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. The girl had witnessed the death of her friend, but now she had seen something else. The first victory. It was small, but it was a victory nonetheless. You did good, Hawk said, her voice soft. Lyra nodded, but she didn't smile. There was no time for celebration. The Xal'Zur would be back. They had made their presence known now, and the battle for Horizon 4 was far from over. As the survivors regrouped, the sound of Xal'Zur reinforcements echoing in the distance sent a chill through the air. Hawk didn't hesitate. She knew the next phase of the plan had to be executed quickly. We've sent them a message, Hawk said, her eyes locked on the horizon. Now we finish it. The Xal'Zur, realizing that something was terribly wrong, would soon regroup. They would send reinforcements, and they would strike back with all their might. But Hawk was ready. The Revenant was still in orbit, and it was only a matter of time before the ship could provide the backup they needed. Lyra's heart raced as she looked at the determined faces of the survivors. They had won this small battle, but the war was far from over. There would be more fighting, more loss, but they had proven something today. They had proven that they were not to be underestimated. The Xal'Zur had made the mistake of thinking humans were weak, but now they would learn the truth. Hawk stood tall, her expression resolute. Let's move. We don't have much time. The survivors quickly gathered their weapons and prepared for the next phase of the battle. The Xal'Zur might have been strong, but humanity had something they could never take. The will to fight, no matter the odds. The first lesson in fear had been delivered. The Xal'Zur reinforcements arrived quickly, their warships descending like vultures circling over a wounded animal. They had underestimated humanity once. They would not make that mistake again. Captain Hawk and her team had prepared for this moment. The battle had been fierce, but it was far from over. The Xal'Zur, though powerful, were not invincible. They had made a critical error by leaving Horizon 4 without fully securing the planet. Now, they were paying the price for their arrogance. The survivors, having dealt the first blow, were ready for whatever came next. They had no choice but to fight. The war was no longer just about protecting a planet. It was about survival, about showing the galaxy that humanity would not be cowed by any alien force, no matter how powerful. The group moved quickly through the ruins of the city, taking cover behind the skeletal remains of buildings. The streets, once filled with life, were now a maze of broken structures and debris. But the survivors knew these streets. They knew where the enemy would be, and they knew how to strike without being seen. We need to find their command center, Hawk said, her voice steady and filled with authority. Take out their leaders, and the rest of the troops will fall apart. Cole nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. It won't be easy. They'll have a strong defense set up around their command post. Hawk looked at the group of survivors, each one determined and resolute. They had lost so much, but they had gained something in return, a fierce will to fight. She knew the next phase would be difficult, but there was no turning back. The Xal'Zur would learn that humanity would not give up without a fight. They moved toward the Xal'Zur command center, the sound of approaching warships growing louder with each step. The survivors slipped through the shadows, using the destruction of the city as cover. The Xal'Zur soldiers patrolled the streets, unaware of the humans closing in on them. The tension in the air was thick, and each moment felt like it could be their last. But they pressed on, knowing they had no choice but to continue. As they neared the command center, a group of Zalzur soldiers appeared, their armored forms silhouetted against the glow of the warships above. They hadn't seen the survivors yet, but it was only a matter of time before they would. "We need to take them out silently," Hawk whispered, her voice calm but urgent. The survivors moved quickly, darting forward with quiet precision. One by one, the Zalzur soldiers fell, their bodies dropping silently to the ground. Lyra, despite her age, moved with the same deadly efficiency as the others. She had seen enough death and destruction to understand the stakes. The Zalzur would not stop until they had destroyed everything. But she would not let them win. Not now. Not ever. The group reached the command center, a heavily fortified building that stood like a fortress amidst the ruins. The entrance was guarded by more Zalzur soldiers, but this time, the survivors were ready. They had learned from their previous encounter, and now they knew how to strike without hesitation. With a signal from Hawk, they stormed the entrance, taking the guards by surprise. The battle was quick but brutal. The Zalzur soldiers fought fiercely, but they were unprepared for the human resistance. The survivors, though fewer in number, fought with the strength of 1,000 warriors. They were not afraid of the Zalzur. They had lost too much to be afraid anymore. As the last soldier fell, Hawk and the team entered the command center. The walls were lined with alien technology, strange devices that hummed with power. But Hawk was focused on one thing: finding the leader. If they could take down the commander, the rest of the Zalzur forces would crumble. The command center was a maze of corridors, each one more confusing than the last. The survivors moved through the building with caution, knowing that one wrong move could lead to disaster. They had to find the commander before reinforcements arrived. Suddenly, the hum of alien voices echoed through the hall. The Zalzur commander had been alerted. The survivors rushed forward, but as they rounded the corner, they were met with a wall of Zalzur soldiers. It was a trap. Hawk's heart raced, but she didn't hesitate. "Fall back," she shouted. "We need to regroup." The team retreated quickly, moving back down the hallway as the Zalzur soldiers advanced. They needed a way out. They couldn't afford to be trapped in the command center. Lyra, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. "There's a maintenance tunnel nearby. We can use it to get behind them." Hawk nodded, grateful for the young girl's quick thinking. "Lead the way." Lyra guided the group to the tunnel, and the survivors made their way through the dark, narrow passage. They could hear the Zalzur soldiers searching for them above, but they kept moving, determined not to be caught. When they emerged on the other side, they found themselves in the heart of the command center once again. But this time, they were behind the Zalzur forces. The survivors quickly took their positions, ready to strike when the time was right. "This is it," Hawk said, her voice filled with resolve. "We end this now." The survivors moved into position, preparing for the final assault. The Zalzur had underestimated them once. Now, it was time for the Zalzur to learn the full meaning of humanity's strength. The survivors crouched low in the shadows of the Zalzur command center, their hearts pounding in unison. They had made it this far, moving through the labyrinth of corridors and evading the enemy's traps. Now they were ready for the final assault. There was no turning back. This was their moment to finish what they had started. Captain Hawk surveyed the room in front of her, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of the enemy's command post. The walls were covered with glowing alien screens, flickering with data and information in languages they couldn't understand. But it didn't matter. The Zalzur had underestimated humanity before, and now they would pay for it. "We're in position," Lieutenant Cole whispered, his voice barely audible over the low hum of the alien technology. Hawk nodded, her fingers tightening around her weapon. "On my mark, we move. Take out the guards and head for the command center's core. The commander is there. If we can take them down, the rest of the Zalzur will scatter." Lyra, The young survivor who had shown so much courage looked up at Hawk, her face a mixture of determination and fear. The child had seen too much, too many friends lost, too much violence. But she had also seen what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. That Talzur had not broken them. They had made them stronger. "Ready," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Hawk gave a single nod, signaling the team to move. The survivors burst from their hiding places, swift and silent like shadows in the night. The first wave of Talzur guards never saw them coming. Within seconds, the air was filled with the sound of quiet strikes, bodies falling to the ground without a sound. The survivors had become a well-trained force, moving with the precision of soldiers who had been through hell and back. They made their way toward the heart of the command center, each step bringing them closer to their goal. The Talzur soldiers, caught off guard and in disarray, scrambled to regroup. But they were no match for the humans. Every soldier that attempted to stand against them was quickly taken down. Hawk led the charge, her eyes focused on the prize. The Talzur commander was close, just beyond the final corridor. The survivors were almost there. But they knew that the hardest part was still to come. As they rounded the corner, they came face to face with the Talzur commander. A tall figure, draped in dark armor, stood in the middle of the command room. The commander's eyes gleamed with cold, unfeeling hatred as they locked onto the humans. "You should have stayed hidden," the Talzur commander said, their voice low and threatening. "This planet will fall. The galaxy will fall. Nothing you do can stop us." Hawk didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward, her expression fierce and unyielding. "You underestimated us once. That was your mistake." With a signal from Hawk, the survivors moved in, quickly surrounding the commander. The battle was fierce, the air crackling with the energy of the fight. The Talzur were strong, but they were no match for the humans' resolve. Every strike from Hawk and her team was filled with the weight of everything they had lost. The people they had once been, the lives that had been stolen from them, the worlds that had been destroyed. This was their chance for justice. The Talzur commander fought back with ruthless strength, swinging their weapon with precision. But the humans had something the Talzur did not: humanity's refusal to give up. They fought not just for survival, but for the memory of every life lost, every destroyed city, every innocent soul taken. Lyra, though young, had learned the harsh truths of this war. She was no longer the scared child hiding in the rubble. She was a warrior, and she moved with a quickness that even the Talzur couldn't predict. She dodged an incoming strike and launched herself at the commander, firing her weapon with deadly accuracy. The blast hit its mark. The commander staggered back, a look of disbelief flashing across their face. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The survivors paused, watching as the Talzur commander fell to the ground, defeated. But it wasn't over. The Talzur forces were still strong, and their reinforcements were closing in. Hawk knew they didn't have much time. She turned to her team, her voice urgent. "We've won the battle, but we still need to get out of here. The Talzur will send more. We can't let them retake this place." The survivors nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The galaxy was vast, and there were still many enemies who would seek to destroy them. But this was a victory that proved humanity was not weak, not helpless. They had the strength to fight back. They had the will to win. As they made their way back to the maintenance tunnel, the sounds of Talzur reinforcements echoed through the corridors. But Hawk and her team were already moving, already planning their next strike. The war had only just begun, but they had already made one thing clear: humanity would never stop fighting. Not as long as there was breath in their lungs. The survivors emerged into the open, the first rays of dawn breaking through the smoke-filled sky. The battle for Horizon 4 had been won, but the fight for the galaxy was far from over. And as the survivors looked back at the ruins of the command center, they knew one thing for certain. Humanity had found its strength, and no force in the universe would ever take that from them. The survivors stood at the edge of the wreckage, looking out over the remains of the Salzur command center. The battle had been long and brutal, but now, for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a sense of quiet. The smoke that had once filled the sky was beginning to clear, and the sun's first light bathed the broken city in a warm glow. But it wasn't peace. Not yet. Captain Hawk wiped the sweat from her brow and looked around at her team. Their faces were tired, bruised, and stained with the marks of battle. But there was something else in their eyes. Determination. The Exalzer might have come to conquer their world, but humanity had fought back, and they had won. "This is just the beginning," Hawk said, her voice low but filled with strength. "We've shown them that we will fight for our homes, for our people. But we can't stop here. The Exalzer are part of something much bigger, and we've only just started to fight back." Lieutenant Cole nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We'll need to take their ships out. We need to stop their reinforcements before they can come back in full force." Hawk looked at him, her eyes sharp with focus. "Agreed. But for now, we rest. We've earned it. Let's take a moment to breathe. We'll move out at first light." The survivors nodded, grateful for the brief respite. For a while, no one spoke. They sat in silence, the weight of the battle slowly starting to lift. Lyra, the young girl who had fought alongside them, looked up at the sky, her gaze distant. She had lost so much: her friends, her home, her innocence. But she had gained something too. A new sense of purpose. She wasn't the scared child she once was. She had become part of something greater, something that couldn't be broken. As the day wore on, the survivors made camp. They set up their gear and started to care for the wounded. The group had suffered losses, but they had survived. And that, in itself, was a victory. The humans had shown the Xalzur that they would not bow down. They had proven that no matter the odds, humanity would rise up and fight. Later that night, as they sat around a small fire, Hawk looked around at the survivors. Each of them had a story. Each of them had lost something. But they had all found something too. They had found each other. In the face of the Xalzur threat, they had become a family, bound together by a single, unbreakable bond: the will to survive. "We've lost a lot," Hawk said quietly, breaking the silence. "But we've also gained a lot. We've gained each other. And that's more than enough to keep fighting." Lyra, who had been silent for a while, spoke up. "We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore, are we?" Hawk looked at her, a small smile on her lips. "No, we're fighting for everyone. For every person out there who doesn't have a voice. For every world that's been taken. For the future." The group nodded in agreement. They knew what was at stake. The Xalzur were a formidable enemy, but they had only one advantage: humanity's ability to keep fighting, no matter the cost. "Tomorrow, we take their ships," Cole said, his voice filled with resolve. "We destroy their reinforcements, and we keep pushing forward. This is just the start of the war." The survivors nodded again, the firelight flickering in their eyes. They were tired, but they were not defeated. They knew that there was still much to do. The Xalzur might have thought they could destroy humanity, but they had underestimated the resilience of the human spirit. As the night wore on, the survivors fell asleep beneath the stars, each one lost in their thoughts. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The Xalzur would be back, and they would have to face even greater challenges ahead. But in the depths of the darkest night, there was hope. The humans had proven that they could withstand anything the galaxy threw at them. At first light, the survivors were ready. They moved quickly, taking the remnants of the Xalzur command center with them. The sound of approaching ships filled the air, but the survivors were no longer afraid. They were fighters now, and they had a mission. The Xalzur might have come to conquer, but they had only awakened a sleeping giant. Humanity would not be broken. They would keep fighting, keep pushing forward. The galaxy would know their strength, their will, and their courage. And in the end, that would be the legacy of humanity. Not the destruction of their world, but their ability to rise from the ashes and stand against the greatest of enemies. That Talzer had made a mistake. They had thought humanity would fall, but they had not counted on one simple truth. When humanity is pushed to the edge, it fights back. And when humanity fights back, the galaxy trembles.